Sufism. Historical context, misinterpretation, and critical analysis. Sufism, or tasawwuf, is often regarded as the mystical dimension of Islam, yet it is important to situate it historically and critically. During the time of Prophet Muhammad and his companions, there is no evidence of a separate Sufi movement or mystical order. The Islamic path was clear and straightforward: obedience to Allah, adherence to the Quran, and following the Sunnah of the Prophet. The companions' focus was on practical spirituality, prayer, ethical conduct, justice, and community welfare, rather than altered states of consciousness or mystical ecstasy. Any claim that an individual was closer to Allah, in a way that could be observed or measured, would contradict the fundamental understanding in Islam that Allah alone knows the state of His servants. It is impossible to externally witness a person's proximity to Allah, and therefore, any assertion of higher connection is inherently speculative and potentially misleading. Sufism, as it developed centuries after the Prophet's time, emerged under a mix of cultural, historical, and psychological influences. Persian cultural elements, poetry, meditation, and ritualized practices gradually shaped a path that emphasized inner experience, ecstatic states, and intense emotional devotion. This historical emergence explains why there were no Sufi orders or structured mystical practices during the Prophet's era. They were a later development shaped by human imagination and cultural adaptation rather than by the original prescriptions of Islam. A critical reason for the presence and persistence of Sufism lies in human psychology. People are naturally drawn to experiences of perceived transcendence or altered states of consciousness. In Sufi practices, prolonged meditation, repetition of phrases dhikr, and ecstatic poetry often induce hallucination-like or trance-like mental states, which may be interpreted as spiritual revelation. However, many such states are better understood as products of the human mind, where imagination, emotion, and neurological factors combine to create powerful subjective experiences. Individuals observing such phenomena may attribute them to divine connection, but as humans cannot perceive Allah directly or fully comprehend the Quranic guidance, this attribution is largely a projection of belief onto mental and emotional patterns. It is also essential to differentiate Sufism from broader spiritualism. Spiritualism, as found in other religious traditions such as Buddhism or Hinduism, often includes meditation, inner exploration, and metaphysical speculation as a path to enlightenment or divine connection. Sufism, although using similar techniques of contemplation and inward focus, is not part of the original Islamic framework and should be analyzed as a culturally and historically distinct phenomenon. Its methods, while aiming for a closeness to Allah, often reflect human imagination and cultural creativity rather than strictly guided religious practice. Analyzing the typical patterns of behavior of renowned Sufi figures such as Rumi, Ibn Arabi, and Bulleh Shah further illustrates these points. These individuals exhibited prolonged periods of introspection, poetic and ecstatic expression, and deep emotional engagement. Their states of mind, often described as absent or trance-like, align with what modern psychology would recognize as hallucinatory or dissociative experiences, amplified by intense emotional and intellectual focus. While their works inspired generations, the mystical experiences themselves cannot be automatically equated with divine revelation. They reflect the interaction between human cognition, emotion, and cultural context. Humans are psychologically predisposed to be influenced by such figures. Emotional intensity, rhetorical eloquence, and the appearance of spiritual authority make it easy for followers to accept experiences as divine. This is compounded by the inability to witness Allah or directly verify spiritual claims, creating fertile ground for misinterpretation. Distinguishing between rigid, critical thinking and influenced, emotionally driven thinking is crucial. The former aligns with evidence, logic, and religious guidance, while the latter is susceptible to projection and delusion. In conclusion, Sufism represents a historically and culturally constructed phenomenon that emerged well after the Prophet's time, often misunderstood as direct spiritual communion with Allah. While it has inspired profound literary and philosophical contributions, its mystical practices largely reflect psychological and emotional processes rather than universally verifiable spiritual truths. Separating Sufism from the broader concept of spiritualism, understanding its historical origins, and critically evaluating its claims enables a clearer appreciation of Islam's authentic path, which rests on Allah, the Quran, and the Prophet. This understanding invites deeper reflection on how humans perceive and interpret spiritual experiences, challenging us to question the nature of belief, imagination, and the mind's susceptibility to projection.